This is Mr. Davis, and this is the Style Pile video featuring dialogue. Before you watch this video, I want to clarify that dialogue is not really intended for argumentative pieces or expository pieces. So if you're writing like an argumentative essay or you're doing like your post-grad plan, you're not going to watch this dialogue video. You need to go watch one of the other videos and find a different way to add style to your writing. All right, now that I've given that kind of preliminary thing, it's going to work the same as your other style pile notes. What is it? You're going to put down dialogue. These are the rules and examples for punctuating dialogue in your writing. The first rule, quotation marks go around the character's words. So if you look down here, we have, "You're cool, Mr. Davis," said the student. The quotation marks are around the student's words, not this part right here that says "said the student," because nobody actually said that. 2. You separate the tags from the dialogue with a comma. So if you look here, "You're cool, Mr. Davis," and then right at the end here, we've got a comma separating the dialogue from the tagline. There are only 2 exceptions to that rule. If it's an exclamation, "Ah!" or a question, then you do not put the comma. So when we look at this next sentence, "I know." You see how this isn't a comma? We put the exclamation mark instead, separating the dialogue from the tagline. The third rule is you capitalize the first sentence of the dialogue. Well, this is the beginning of the sentence, so of course we capitalize it. I is a proper or is a pronoun, so of course we capitalize that. But then when we look at this third sentence, the student replied, and then you see here we're capitalizing the first letter of the dialogue. Man, do I love this class. Final rule is you start a new paragraph every time the speaker changes. So the first line here is from the student, the second line is from Mr. Davis, and then when it goes back to the student, we start another new paragraph. So each time I'm hitting tab and I'm starting a new paragraph. All right, so really quickly I'm going to show you the errors we have here. I'll take 12 tacos. Well, we know that we have to separate our dialogue and our taglines with a comma, so that broke one of the rules that we learned about dialogue. I'll put the comma there. "Okay," Billy replied. Right here we have a period. Remember, we do not separate our dialogue and our tagline with a period. Instead, this should be a comma here. All right, we have another example here of some dialogue. I want you to take a look at your notes and then take a look at the example and figure out what is wrong with this example here. All right, let's go through this really quick. "Hey," said Timmy. Well, it looks like it's following the first rule, or at least one of the rules here. Look, it started a new paragraph and indented it. Here it changes speakers from Timmy to Ronald, and it started a new paragraph, so it's following that rule. We've got the comma here separating the dialogue and the tagline. This is the start of the sentence, but we capitalized it just because we capitalized the beginning of all sentences and the beginning of all dialogue. So, "Hey," said Timmy. He gave his friend a high five and stood facing him. "How's it going?" Ronald asked. Well, if that sounded funny to you, it's because we put this question mark in the wrong place. Remember that when you're asking a question or one of your characters is asking a question, you put the question mark in place of the comma, separating it from the tagline, and then at the end, instead of a question mark, you would just have a period. Okay, so that was what needed to be fixed there. All right, one more example that I'm going to have you look at and figure out what is wrong. We've got this example where 2 characters are speaking here. There are a few mistakes. I want you to check it out and see what are the mistakes here. All right, so hopefully you saw that we had 2 characters speaking, right? We have how much milk can you drink at one time? Melissa asked as she picked up the gallon and passed it over to Frank. It uses a question mark to separate the dialogue from the tagline. That's totally fine, okay? But then it switches to Frank speaking. Frank took the gallon, put it to his mouth, and said, This is a character other than Melissa speaking, so this should be a new paragraph. We should have started a new paragraph with it. Second mistake we have here is we're supposed to capitalize the beginning of all dialogue. So, and said, even though this isn't the start of the sentence, this W for watch should be a capital W. Watch this. All right, now that you've gotten a chance to practice with some of these rules, I want you to use it. I want you to create in that use it box on your notes a conversation where you either succeed or fail, depending on your mood, at asking your dream date to the prom. So take a moment, you're going to fill in that use it box. All right, so there are many possible answers to this. For mine, I just put, would you go to the prom with me? And I put a question mark here because that's a question, right? Instead of a comma. Mr. Davis asked his wife. Mrs. Davis, because I'm married, looked at him, smiled, and said, no. Notice I put a comma here to separate my tagline from my dialogue. I capitalized my dialogue here. If you struggled with this lesson, have your teacher come over and check your use it box to make sure you did it correctly. Here are a few more examples. This one is an example of when you have a character say more than one line before you switch to the next. So how much time do we have? Sheila asked, I don't think I can finish all the classwork before the end of class. I think, and now it's switching to Lisa. So look, we started a new paragraph here because we switched over to Lisa. Lisa said, looking at the clock, you can see here I've got a comma separating this dialogue from the tagline. And then this is one of an example of a tagline that comes in the middle of the dialogue. You can do this too. It's a little bit fancier. So I think, Lisa said, looking at the clock, and then we've got another comma here, about 15 more minutes. So that's just a more complicated way of doing dialogue. It's a little bit more stylish if you'd like to punctuate it that way. Your job now. Use dialogue to add style and flair to your narrative writing. Let me underline that, narrative. So if you're doing an argumentative or an expository piece, our dialogue does not usually belong in those. Should I use dialogue in my narrative? The student asked Mr. Davis. Yeah, Mr. Davis replied, but don't overdo it, Jimmy. And let me put on some quotation marks because that was missing. When you're writing a narrative, dialogue is an effective way to have flair and style in your writing, but don't make the whole thing dialogue. There should definitely be description and sensory details and setting, but dialogue is definitely an important part of a narrative. Thank you for watching the video.